And we are live. Daphne, oh my goodness, how was Peru?
It was incredible. It was one of the hardest hikes I've done. I hiked to Machu Picchu. So
Oh,
that
sounds so
resonates in my
awesome.
head. Yeah, it was great.
I
Highly
love it.
recommend it.
I
Yes.
love it. Did you hear any voices while you were up and in the mountains hiking telling you that you couldn't do it?
So many. This will be so hard. It's too hot. And then, oh my gosh, the rain is coming. It's too cold.
What are we talking about today?
The crazy roommate. Yeah.
Welcome to Life, the ultimate choose-your-own adventure game with hosts Cliff Ravenscraft and Daphne Scott. Join this dynamic duo as they explore the profound concept of life as a thrilling adventure, blending ancient wisdom and modern psychology. Embrace the joy of living with presence, creativity, and playfulness. It's time to navigate the game of life together. Are you ready to play? Let the adventure begin.
All right, what stood out to me today is, are you ready to play?
Oh, yes, I am. And
I'm
what stood
ready to
out
play.
Yeah, I'm ready. And what stood out to me was embrace the joy.
Really? I don't know that I even heard the phrase embrace the joy in there.
Embrace the joy of living with presence. Like,
So
I'm not
Daphne,
gonna
we
fight
are
it.
we are all over the place this morning. So there are so many different things. Number one, I brought up in the opening, how was Peru? You were talking Machu Picchu.
Yeah.
I asked you a crazy question about, did you hear voices in your head? And we also have a big announcement about coming to a conclusion for the show.
Yes, we do.
Wow. Talk about all, it's like I thought we were going to embrace the journey together. What's going on here, Daphne? Let's talk about this. Let's break it down.
Yeah, well, as life does, it brings other opportunities and things for me, and I know for you too. And I think what we did really well with this show, and as we created this together, in the spirit of living with presence, was really leaving the door open. We
Mhm.
were gonna do so many episodes, and there was a time when life was taking a shift for you, and we said, "We'll do this in seasons." I mean, we really have been iterating on this together just as we go. And so there have been a couple opportunities that have been, placed in front of me, which I'm very excited about, which also are requiring me to shift my attention and my energy and what I'm putting my attention on. So we are going to make today's show the last show, as far as we can tell,
As far as we can tell.
for now.
Never say never.
Never say never, because we never know with the two of us. I mean, who would have thought 5 years ago we'd be doing this show together? So, yeah, but today will be the last official episode of season 2 and for the immediate future.
Yes. And one thing I will say that I love about this, Daphne, is it has certainly inspired me. There are a number of clients that I've worked with over the years who have done some incredibly powerful things in this world, who are subject matter experts in certain areas.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I would never had thought of unless you had asked me to do this show with you was for me now to go to other folks and say, let's co-host a show together.
Yeah.
Now, I will definitely tell you that my idea is to apply what I've done for some other shows, which is, for me, I like to go and create a podcast about a special niche topic
Yeah.
and only do 5 to 10 episodes
Yeah.
with the intention that there will never be another episode beyond those 5 to 10. And this becomes an evergreen piece of content, or piece of series of content, that it adds value to that person that is a friend of mine and myself, where people like, I've never heard of either of those two people, but I was searching for information about this very special niche specialty topic.
Yeah.
You listen to all 5 to 10 episodes, it's like, oh my gosh, I love both of these people. And they're on both of our mailing lists. And that continues to happen for years and years down the road as a result of coming together and doing that. So I can tell you, Daphne, that I have had a number of people from this podcast who never heard my name, but they knew you,
Yeah.
who are now on my mailing list. And I think the same has
Love it.
happened on your Substack. So
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. And I so appreciate that. And I think that that is the beauty of collaborating and creating together and doing something fun, right? Wherever it leads from a business standpoint, if nothing else, we've had a fun time and talking about a topic that's really important to us, which
yeah.
I would put in the realm of our mental and emotional well-being, right? And playing this game of life,
Yeah.
choosing
And
our adventure.
if you know what, if nothing else, I hope that folks have come away with the idea of the perception that I could look at life as a game.
Yeah. Yes.
That
Yes.
that it's not it doesn't have to be so serious. It
No.
doesn't have to be all drama. It can be fun. I loved when you and I were actually, it was you dreaming up the show. You were talking about, like, the sandbox, and, and we were talking about just having play,
Yeah.
having fun, and being, intentional about living life to its fullest. And so, yeah, I love that we've put this out into the world and shared our play in front of others.
Thank you. I do too. And ha I've often said, and I wrote this when I was 18 years old, and I still have it, by the way, that if there's ever a time when I'm not having fun doing something, I will not do it. And I had to define that more clearly, as I aged. As I got more wise. It doesn't mean that I don't do challenging things, like I'll climb a mountain, climb several, climb through to Machu Picchu. It doesn't mean that I don't do things that challenge my resilience, but even that, those things I find fun and engaging. So yeah, I had to keep refining that, I think, but resilience is a whole nother piece of that. But at the end of the day, if it's really not fun, I don't really want to participate in it. Why would I do that?
Yeah, there's a distinction there, and that might be a future episode. If we ever do come back, we can talk about the distinction of a commitment to having fun in life, but still understanding that there are challenging, difficult things that
Yeah.
might be a part of doing fun things in the world.
That's right, and learning, learning is fun, right? Even the
Learning.
challenging yeah, we're gonna save that for a potential future episode.
Excellent. Daphne, what are we talking about today? And by the way, I already know, and it is one of my favorite topics.
I figured it would be. It's one of mine too. We're talking about the crazy roommate, that voice that seems like it lives in our head. I it may I don't really know where it is, if I'm being honest, but we seem to have this experience of this thing we would call this voice or these thoughts,
The
and
inner dialogue.
inner dialogue that seemed, I'm very careful to say that they're in our head because consciousness it's not really in your head. We think we have a head.
We can go there.
All
Yes.
right, let's go there.
Let's go there.
Think about it. There was a time when there was no mirrors.
Mhm.
Like, maybe you saw your reflection in the water, I would imagine people, and I've often thought about what if I had never had a mirror? Like, would I have this idea that I had this head? Like, my eyes can't see themselves. As a matter of fact, if I'd never had a mirror, do you realize I would not see my own face?
Well, the interesting thing is you don't see your face. You
No.
see you see an image of your face,
Yes. And
which
even
is
mirrors,
funny.
it is funny, and I don't know if you've ever been exposed to this idea of your real image where they put 2 mirrors corner to corner?
Yeah, where so you actually see, instead of seeing yourself reversed, you see yourself as other people see you.
Yes. Now, I've actually not done that. I've read about it. I just haven't taken the time to get 2 mirrors and put
Well,
them together,
I
but
do it quite a bit, and you and I are doing somewhat of that. So, for example, when we are looking into a teleprompter that is mirroring the image reversed, so that
actually, that's
sometimes
true.
we are seeing some of that. Like, for example, right now, I'm using a monitor that is not designed to be used with a teleprompter, but I'm
Yeah.
looking into a teleprompter. So I'm actually looking at you reversed. So
Yeah.
you look different to me than I would normally see you,
Yeah.
but I'm looking at me the way you would it face to face see me.
Right.
So I see me as anyway, it's
If
all
you're still
crazy.
with us.
Which, by the way, none of this so far has anything to do with the inner dialogue roommate thing yet, but that's
But
okay.
it does have to do with perception.
It does have to do with perception.
Yes. And the reason I was emphasizing that is, just one of the first things that I want to call out is that we just even have this perception that this thing is in our head. And just even getting in touch with that, like where is this inner dialogue happening? Like it's very strange. Is a very strange phenomenon. And if you sit quietly long enough, you'll in my experience anyway, you can get in touch with this reality so that it really isn't, there is no head here. There's no place for this to sort of, maybe it's because all of our senses, where our neurological system is wired, my hearing comes in through my ears and my eyes, those sensations, perceptions come in. So I think that it's happening in my head. But anyway, I just call that out specifically because when we talk about these thoughts, it's even recognizing that we have the thoughts. And then when you get in touch with, like, I don't even know where these are living, really.
Yeah.
I say they're in my head.
This idea of the roommate in the head, the first time I've heard of it as that metaphor was from Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul. Have you
Yes.
read that book?
Several times.
He
Yes.
did such a wonderful job
Exquisite job.
of explaining that inner voice
Yes.
and giving it the metaphor of, what would you do if you lived with this person who had this habitual way of communicating all of the time?
All the
And
time.
and he describes this unruly roommate that is judgmental, sarcastic, condemning, and all that. It's like you would kick this person out in a heartbeat.
Never
You
happy.
you would never let this person live rent-free in your space.
Never.
Yet
And even paying the rent, you wouldn't let that person. I mean, if this
right.
truly was, and he does in that book very, very, I think it's one of the best written books on this topic. I really do. And I think he took so many wonderful practices and, but yeah, I think it's just an incredibly well-written book. Nevertheless, and he, when he talks about this roommate, I mean, you wouldn't even let you wouldn't even keep this person around in your
Right.
life, really. Yeah. And I think at the root, really what he calls out and what I think is so important about this crazy roommate is this roommate is never, ever satisfied with anything. This is good. This is bad. Oh my gosh, that went okay, but it's not good enough. I think that's really this voice, these thoughts in our heads. That is really the back and forth. And I think getting in touch with that, you recognize very, very clearly after a minute of listening to it, this thing is just crazy. It's never going to be happy with anything that's going on or satisfied. Which, by the way, I think is why gratitude practices took such a hold many, many years ago. I think gratitude is really one of the remedies, if you will, to dealing with this sort of crazy thing, this crazy voice. We'll talk about that more as we get into the episode. Nevertheless, it's never satisfied.
All right.
It's never
Well, I'm ready for you to take the lead in the dialogue, and I'm along for this ride to journey
Okay.
with you, co-piloting here.
All right, here we go. Here we go. We're gonna get into it. So I think one of the first places I wanted to play was really looking at, first of all, recognizing that we do have this inner dialogue, thoughts that are arising. And sometimes they are a storyline. We've talked about Byron Katie's work several times on the show. There's a story you tell yourself, there's a narrative that comes up. Sometimes it's one thought that seems to come and go. But I think the first part is really, their thoughts are arising. And we don't choose our thoughts when they arise, which I think is really fascinating. By the way, we also will notice that we're very caught up in our thoughts. We listen to them a lot. Have you noticed this?
Yes.
Yes.
There is one thing that comes to my mind though when you talk about we don't choose our thoughts. But
Yeah.
I want to have you finish your line of thinking there because I want to come back to that.
Yeah. Well, we can, so don't mishear me.
Okay.
I know where you're headed, Cliff.
Okay.
So we can change our thoughts. We can change our thinking, or rather what we choose to put our attention on to a certain
Yes.
degree, right? But thoughts typically, they just arise. I'm sitting quietly minding my own business and suddenly this thought pops in, "Oh, you know what? You should probably go take the trash out." Or, "Ooh, you know, I'm reading a book and all of a sudden, you know what? I probably shouldn't have said that to so and so." Just thoughts, they just pop up, they just arise. So that's the first thing. And secondly, we notice them. We can become sort of aware, not sort of. We can become aware, "Oh, that's a thought that just popped into my awareness." And they're always popping into my awareness. Versus becoming what I call identified with the thought.
Yep.
And what do I mean by identified? This took me a long time ago, several years to understand what this meant. But what it meant was that a thought would arise and it was like a train pulling into a station and I would get on. And I would ride that thought. Said another way, I would believe it. And I would just I would think that I would start to believe that my identity, who I was my thinking. It was my thoughts. Two things. One, Byron Katie says this, who would you be without your story? What she's positing is, who would you be without a thought? Who would you be without any of your thoughts? What are you? We'll get to that in a second. Descartes, when he was working through his whole philosophy, and most people are familiar with this, I think, therefore I am. So that's how identified. That was the best he could do at the time, to sort of demonstrate in some way that we exist, our identity, we exist with and because of our thoughts, because we can think, or because thoughts arise. And what we people broke down many, many, many years later, and different philosophers and spiritual leaders, came back to, is actually there's something beyond that we are not our thoughts. And that's really the root of this whole conversation. We are not our thinking. We only start to feel that way. The thing that is ourself is much, much it's not necessary to have thoughts.
Yeah.
In that way. Yeah.
So there are a couple of thoughts that come to my mind when it comes to being identified with thoughts. So one of the things that I have learned to do is try to avoid saying that, I am angry. I am
Yes.
I am all of these different things.
Yeah.
But instead, I am aware that there is a sensation of anger arising within the physicality of my body, of this
Yes.
body.
Yes.
And so there's something to do with the language of that. The other
Very
thing
important.
is that this thought that's there, it's not like I'm thinking this. No, it's
Mhm.
like I'm aware that these thoughts are in my awareness, in my consciousness.
Yes.
The other thing that comes up for me is I love the train metaphor, and there's a book called Super Coach by Michael Neal. And he talks about the train station of the mind, and that if you imagine a big train station terminal where there's all sorts of trains pulling in and out, going to all sorts of different destinations, and you might be thinking that, I'm on platform number 9 and I need to be here at 1 p.m. because that's my train to my destination. Well, if you get there early and if you're not paying attention, you may look up and all of a sudden there's a train on platform number 9, and you get on the train, but you didn't realize that it's actually 12:45. It's not 1 p.m. and that train's going to a completely different destination, but you thought that was your train.
Yeah.
All right, and now all of a sudden you're off to a different. And what I love about the train station of the mind metaphor is that these thoughts, it's a train of thoughts. It's like not
Yes.
just one thought, but there's another car and another car, and they're all leading you to a specific destination. And when I actually become aware that these thoughts are existing, when I actually am aware that I have jumped on board a train of thoughts and I'm
Mhm.
riding down the rails, I ask myself, if I continue to stay on this train of thought, what where does this lead me to?
Yeah.
Where am I going to end up emotionally, action rise, whatever and is this the destination I want to go to? And
Yeah.
at any time I want to, I can actually get off of that train and let the thoughts go on by. So I love that. And the other one is as you know, I'm into amateur radio.
Yes.
And one of the ways that I think about this in a very metaphysical way is that there is this invisible reality beyond the physical reality that we have. And that I think I heard it called the mass consciousness of humanity. So every thought that has ever been thought is in some way like an electromagnetic wave that just exists in the mass consciousness of humanity. And every thought vibrates at a different frequency. And if you think about Dr. Hawkins' book, Map of Consciousness, Dr.
Yeah.
David R. Hawkins, he talks about the different frequencies, and thoughts actually vibrate at different frequencies. And so when I think about this, is like, wow, where, like, if I find myself in a uh, catastrophizing a catastrophizing narrative about what this means that I just experienced,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden a train of thoughts, and it's like, oh wow, I don't like how I'm feeling inside. I don't like where this is leading. This is not beneficial. I know that overall this is, I'd rather head over in this direction and like to choose this adventure in life. But I know that if I stay on this train of thought, if I stay tuned into this frequency,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to get to my destination. So I can actually bring my conscious awareness away from that train or that frequency, and I can actually say, okay, well, you talked about gratitude practice. I can raise my consciousness to the level of gratitude and appreciation, and all of a sudden, there's a whole different stream of thoughts that are actually on that level.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is leading me to intentional action that I have what I feel more control over in life.
Yeah. Well, you're getting right to the root of being able to really what I would say is the very skillful practice of noticing and noticing what your train of thoughts are and what's starting to happen. And Cliff, I think some of what just came to me as you're talking, a person who really can love themselves
Mm.
catches those thoughts that really are not helpful to them. How is it helpful to think this person doesn't care about me? Or I'm just bringing up random ones, or this is going to go poorly, or
Or this person just betrayed me.
yeah, or this person betrayed me. It was personal. We've talked about this with the 4 agreements. Yes,
Yes.
I
Check.
did. It was all spontaneous. I love it. Yeah, how is it helpful for me to take things personally or to believe that they're personal? If I love myself and what would I tell a person that I love dearly? Would I tell them, yes, take everything personally by all means? I probably wouldn't do that. So, even as you were talking, I'm like, yeah, I think that's part of the trick too. When you really care about yourself in a loving, compassionate kind way, you start to catch these less than savory thoughts and trains of thought that can lead you away from the life that you say you really want to live and the games that you really want to play. That being said, when we talk about being identified with them, there's a certain part of and we've talked about the ego too, there's a certain part of our personality that gets attached to these thoughts, that it starts to create this identity, like this is who I am in the world, right? And that is the trickier part of this whole thing, is unhooking that
Yeah.
my identity has nothing to do with a train of thought or thoughts at all.
Well,
I'm actually something beyond that, which we'll get to.
and our identity, and it goes back to the 4 agreements, the dream of the planet, and
Yeah.
it's my personal dream. What is my dream of me?
Yes.
What is the narrative about who I am?
Yeah.
And and we get to create that. That's a part of the choose your own adventure.
Mhm.
I identify, like, for example, I can tell you right now, in this human interface that I'm currently in, I am husband, I am father, I am business owner, I'm entrepreneur, I'm a guy who has passion for these different areas of interest, and I get to choose all of that.
Yeah, these are your roles.
These are my
Roles,
roles.
different characters you get to play.
Yet I am very much aware that that's not actually who I am.
No.
These are simply agreements that I've made as far as what I will put my attention to, and what and what it's almost like I auditioned to it's like I went to the writer's room of life, right?
Yeah.
And I went to the writers. I said, "Hey, I have an idea for my character.
Yeah.
I'd like to propose we go down this little storyline and this little arc, and how about Cliff does this and experiences these things and blah, blah, and it's like, oh yeah, and of course they're like, but hey, just so you know, we're gonna throw in a couple curveballs that you're not aware of, just to see how you react to it. And it's like, but I do feel at some level I have that level of autonomy to step back and say, okay, this was a portion. This was how I identified myself for a period of time, and that was great for that season.
Mhm.
And I think I'd like to play a different game in this season
Yeah.
and and I can pull out of that identity and say, this is the new identity I want to try on.
Yes.
Some of them, some things carry over, but the idea of reinventing myself and giving myself that unconditional love, my acceptance, my value is not dependent upon what I was doing for others over here before,
Yes, and not dependent on doing, period.
not dependent on doing,
Yeah,
period.
that's a whole nother conversation, in our modern times. I mean, we have become very identified with what we do. What do you do for work? I mean, that's the number one question that will get me to leave any party. Someone started asking me that, and it wasn't always that way. I think I said this on one of our other shows. It used to be that people asked first, "Where are you from?" That was
Really?
much more relevant, yeah. It wasn't until, like, the 1800s that, really when the modern world started to take over and we started to become much more attached to our work, so to speak, and that started to carry much more. We decided somewhere, somebody did, and we agreed that that would carry all the status, that what we did actually mattered more about who we were and the status that we had in the world, which is really, what and this fits actually a lot in with what we're talking about with thoughts, because again, when we start buying into some of those narratives that what you do is more important than what you really are,
Yeah.
right?
And
And I don't know about you, but I have watched jobs come and go. Titles, right? Come and go. And that can be very, not only, when people's and we work with people who are solopreneurs and working in organizations, and an organization goes through a sale and they're going to restructure and you are no longer vice president of XYZ,
yeah.
right? And so when you become identified with that, which is, by the way, a series of thoughts,
Yep.
that's all it is, then that becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who are you if you did not have those thoughts?
Yes. Who are you? So the two questions, right? So what do we do? And I think you were really getting to that first part. What do we do with these thoughts? Like how do we how do we relate to these? How do we work with this stuff of the mind? This crazy roommate who's never going to be satisfied, who's going to create all kinds of stories and narratives that just aren't helpful. And then secondly, if I'm not my thinking, then, if I'm not believing these thoughts, then who am I?
So let me push back for just a second because
Yeah.
I've heard you say that 2 times now. The crazy roommate is never going to be satisfied.
Mm-mm.
And so tell me what you think about this, because
Okay.
I the way that I experienced this is like the crazy roommate was the roommate that I had that I allowed to stay with me because at some level I felt that I needed that level of criticism and critique,
Hmm.
because if I don't have that self-criticism, if I don't have that voice in my head telling me, what I'm doing wrong and how
Yeah.
I could
Be more
improve and all
disciplined, do
that,
more hard work harder.
exactly, you're not working hard enough.
Oh,
If that voice wasn't there, I don't think that I would be as motivated to be the best that I could be. And so that's why I might let that roommate be there and let them have free rent, whatever, in the space,
sure.
maybe just metaphorically in my head. And so my own experience, though, is that there was a time where I learned the value of unconditional love.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And when I understood unconditional love, meaning that I love me for who I am, and I refuse to attach myself to any negative criticism, guilt, or shame. I will simply love myself unconditionally. I will understand that I'm always doing the best that I can with what I have to work with.
Hmm.
And that can shift at different levels of times based upon a number of factors. But you know what? At my essence, at my core, I am a pure being here to experience life, and I'm trying to do my best. So when I began to do that, and I began to implement gratitude, appreciation, and I
Mhm.
changed the habitual frequencies of where I spend the most of my time vibrationally,
Yes.
it's like that room. I wouldn't say it's the same roommate if we're trying. I think this might be where the metaphor breaks down to me. But
Mhm.
I actually have a new roommate that comes in, and
Yes.
I hear her voice, but it's such a positive voice.
Yeah.
And it's it is one that is satisfied with what is.
Yes,
So so
because
so
you've
so
done
do
the
you see
work
where
too.
so when I hear you say that that voice is never satisfied, what I'm getting at is I feel like the voice in my head is I recognize that those are still thoughts, and I
Mhm.
still recognize those thoughts are not me. I
Mhm.
exist beyond those thoughts.
Yes, you do.
But I did actually put out an ad and say, "Here's the standards of what I'm looking for a roommate." And I've got a pretty amazing roommate in my head, metaphorically.
Yeah, well, now you do, but you didn't.
Right.
Right. So, understand that the path that I'm laying out here, Cliff, is what is really the path of understanding, okay, look, for those of you that are having the experience of this crazy roommate that never seems to be satisfied, that usually comes with a lot of judgment and criticism, but really the game, in my experience with the mind, is it likes this, it doesn't like that.
Mhm.
And that's a setup. I don't know if you've noticed, because at a certain point, we really don't have that much control about what's going on in the world or what's going on. I came in today, the computer needed to be rebooted, right? I don't like when I have to reboot my computer. And, if I'm not, and I'm mindful enough and catch it, when this starts chirping like, oh, this is such an inconvenience and blah, 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 and you're going to be late. Now, right? Even those moments, those tiny moments, even though it's not a judgment or criticism about me per se, there's a moment of unrest there, it's grainy. It's not just simply enjoying the moment for what it is. Oh, great. I could reframe it and say another thought would be, ah, you have 3 minutes to sit here and just relax while your computer reboots. Enjoy the quiet. Right? But instead, the
So
chirping starts, right?
that's interesting because when I have that experience,
Mhm.
not all the time, but a good portion of the time, I'll give you a perfect example. On Friday, Stephanie and I recorded Building a Life and Business Together,
Mhm.
and which is our new podcast that we're doing together. And we the intention was to record that and then do the post production and get it published before the end of the day, or actually get it scheduled so it went out at 5 a.m. on Monday.
Yeah.
However, I had a last minute opportunity to onboard somebody who was a potential new client. So I took that opportunity, and so I didn't do that. And then over the weekend, I'm like, you know what? It's the weekend. It's really beautiful weather. It's not raining. I'm going to go out and play with my amateur radio until from sun up to sundown. I am like fully engaged in all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, it's Monday morning, and we typically get up at 6:30, Stephanie and I, and we're out to the gym at 7:30. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get up at 6:30 and I'll go down and get that thing scheduled, and it's only going to be 90 minutes late. Well, my alarm didn't go off. I must have accidentally not set it because I
Yeah.
thought that I had set it. I wake up at 7:30. We're supposed to be in the car pulling out to go to the gym, and it's 7:30 and I just woke up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Huh, I must have needed an extra hour of sleep.
Yeah.
That's great." And it's like, "Okay." And then I'm like, "Okay, well, what does this mean? Well, let's just go ahead and get out." And Stephanie's like, "Well, do you wanna just work out this evening?" I'm like, "No, let's just go ahead and do the gym first thing in the morning,
Yeah.
and everything will work out." And then, then there was a twinge of thought that says, "Well, at 5 a.m., that podcast was supposed to go out." And I'm like,
There it
"Yeah,
is.
it was, but there must be a reason why I didn't do it." And so there'll be plenty of time when I get back from the gym. That's, by the way, that's the voice that I
Yeah.
actually listen
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And then I went to the gym and I came back, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, now it's time to process this. Let's get this thing done first. And what I will say is that I'm absolutely convinced, after having had a great workout and all this other stuff, an extra hour of sleep, what I came up with show notes and then a subsequent email newsletter to my audience and all this other stuff, I had ample time. I probably spent about 2 hours working on things where if I would have tried to squeeze it in Friday afternoon, if I would have tried to squeeze it in on Monday morning before going to the gym, it wouldn't have been as beautiful and eloquent. And it's like everything happens for a reason. And that's kind of the overall vibe and dialogue that was going on in my head.
Yeah, and I think that, I think with the work that you have done, I think the work that I have done, I think that's the whole point. I mean, this is the whole point of us talking about this first question on the show. What do you do with these thoughts? How do we work with this? How do I how do I develop the skill so that when I hear that even the tiniest bit of something that's adding what I would call adding stress,
Mhm.
fighting reality,
Fighting reality.
right? And our minds do it all the time. Like even that little bit where you're like, well, that was supposed to be posted at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Cliff. People are
Yeah.
watching you.
I heard it, and that was me.
Yes.
I was on platform number 9, and then that little that train rolled in, and I'm like, "Wait a second, let me look at the clock.
Hold on.
Oh, that's the 12:45 train. I'm waiting
Yes.
for the 1 p.m. train."
Yes. And yeah, exactly. And so those, it's even that for me, that tiny bit of, I always feel it as the sensation that I feel when those thoughts are, it's like, it really does feel like friction. It feels like two pieces of sandpaper to me. And it's
Mhm.
small. These are the tiny things that happen in a day. However, I think the accumulation,
Oh, yeah.
right? That's the part. And now we're not, now it has taken over. This voice has taken over. Now I'm doing crazy things like not sleeping because I've told myself that podcast has to be done by 5 a.m.
That is exactly what I would have done. I
Yeah.
would have been, it's midnight, Friday
Yes.
night. I'm like, I said I was gonna do this before the end of the day, and I'm up until 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's gonna be it would have been terrible. I would have not been at my best.
No, not at all. And you said this a couple times. I want to catch it because it's so important. And this means,
Yeah.
right? I didn't wake up at 6:30 and it means this. And
Mhm.
your mind now it's off to it means the day is going to be horrible. It means I'm not a responsible person. All it just starts, right? The train just starts. And now we're in reaction to that because we become identified with it. So yeah, it's even that minute sort of things that those thoughts seem so on the scale of negative thoughts that we can probably have, they seem small. But
Yeah.
to me, they're everything.
They are everything because every
Yes.
little tiny one builds on another, and before you know it, you've got some momentum going, and you're going in one direction or another in life.
Yes.
We're always moving. There
Yes.
is never a time when I mean, if we're interfacing here in the physical reality, we are moving.
That's right. We're on and to me, we're either on course or off course,
Yeah,
right? We're either
aligned or unaligned.
that's right. We're aligned or unaligned. So, yes, and I wanna come back because the question is, what do we do? Well, you have highlighted, first of all, I think what's very possible. And what I wanna say is that it is very possible, and in my experience too, this is not I am not making any wild metaphysical claim here about the universe at large, but what I am saying is that it is entirely possible that you can catch and work with the thoughts of your mind to stay on the track that you'd like to stay on. That's like probably a more kinder track to you. And by the way, if you're on the track for you that's really kind and understanding this unconditional love and what it means to talk kindly to yourself, it is 100% possible that that will influence the people around you in a very profound way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do we do? And very practical, you mentioned a couple of things like I guess I needed sleep. I mean, I would say that I think that people have done a lot, I was saying for myself, looked at all the ways that exercise is good for my physical being, for example. Well, guess what? It is, I think, imperative for your mental and emotional well-being.
Mhm.
I think getting good sleep, we'll talk about meditation here in a minute and some other practices and gratitude practices and all these other things. But I think those two things, just sleep and regular amounts of exercise, just getting your heart rate elevated for a little bit, are two things that are just imperative for helping you work with your thoughts and work with your mind. I I I don't know in my experience what other, two most profound things that we can do for us or the two of the most profound things that we can do for ourselves is make sure that we're well rested and that we've actually moved our bodies.
Yeah. So I absolutely concur with all of that. I would add on top of those is meditation
Yes.
and being intentional about what you eat.
Yes. The foods that we put in our
The
bodies. Yes.
foods that we put in our body, the I when I came to a place of mindfulness and being able to really tune in to what's going on internally inside of me,
Yeah.
it's amazing that I can go and eat something and then if I sit in meditation and mindfulness and just explore the sensations of what's happening inside of me,
I had this happen the other
and
day when I was
and
meditating.
I'm like, "Wow."
Yeah.
And I become so keenly aware. So much though, by the way, my favorite foods used to be pizza and French fries.
Oh,
All right. Now
hmm.
I could still eat pizza, by the way. I can
I love French fries. I gotta be honest. I
well,
do love
I
them.
I tell you the last couple of times I've had French fries, I eat them and what I'm recognizing inside is like, huh, you know what? Those are not
Good.
actually being processed in a efficient manner,
Yes.
and I am aware that there's distress internally.
Yes. Have you
And I
noticed also that after about the 4th or 5th one that you eat, they really don't taste that great?
well, that's another
Would you
thing
say?
is that I've been on ketogenic diet since July 1st again. So
Yeah.
and I went and said, "You know what? I'm gonna do a carb cycle." And I had a cheeseburger with french fries,
Mm,
and I ate 3 of them, and I'm like, "Wow." I basically why don't I just go over to the vat, grab a spoon,
yeah.
and get some grease and just and
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, that's exactly what that french fry tastes like."
Yep. It does. After a few of them, it really does if you're paying
Yeah.
but to your point, if you're paying attention.
If you're paying attention.
Yeah.
And I must say that I used to do everything mindlessly.
Mhm. Yes. And so when we get in touch with and I wanna come back to the body because it's just so and meditation too. When you said that, I was I I usually drink a cup of coffee, maybe 2 in the morning, and that's it. And I had, like 3 the other morning, and then I usually do my meditation first thing in the morning. So I waited.
Oh, yeah.
And I was so distracted by the pacing of my heartbeat. At one moment, I'm like, "Okay, that was probably a bit too much caffeine for you," you know? So it's funny when you mentioned that. But yeah, so mind how intentional are we being? And, our mind can even play tricks with that. Like, you're not being intentional enough. If you
Mhm.
were this is like the stuff that starts, right? Like, so I'm gonna be intentional, I'm gonna think through my day, and then I wake up an hour late. Well, you weren't being intentional enough. All these sorts of things. And how do we so when we're taking first and foremost, before we talk about meditation more, but I do want to talk about it. We're taking care of ourselves. We're watching we're eating healthy foods, foods that are healthy for us. We're getting good sleep. We're moving our bodies intentionally every day. That's, I think, step 1, step 3 of 1, doing those things in a way. And then secondly, with meditation, I have not found another practice that has allowed me to get in touch with really what the mind is doing
Mhm.
and how distracted we can become with thoughts. I mean, I think, and Cliff, I don't know what your experience has been, but I think when you sit, the first, using the first technique of Vipassana meditation, which is what most people are taught, putting your attention on your breath and just noticing how quickly your attention is no longer on your breath. And when we want to talk about being intentional, I we really can get in touch with, like, I have no hope for being intentional because the thoughts start, and before you know it, you're making your grocery list,
Mhm.
or you're thinking about the conversation, and this is when I really I've been a long-term meditator for over 20 years now, but when I really got in touch with, wow, not only does it just not only does a thought come and I start following it, right? My attention, my consciousness, whatever this is in here starts following it, gets on the train. Love that metaphor. It also does another interesting thing. It's either in the future or the past. it's just bouncing around between the future, planning something, thinking about what's going to happen, or it's replaying something that did happen, or combining them in some clever way.
Yep.
And the advantage of being able to really sit still and notice that, just notice it. And I think this is when we get to that first question, what do we do with these thoughts? Just simply being able to notice them, I think starts to create that space where we start to become less identified with them, that we can truly, and this is what you were describing, that you can see these thoughts. Like you wake up at 7:30, your intention was to wake up at 6:30. That was the original idea. And you wake up at 7:30 and you're so quick now to catch. It doesn't mean the thought doesn't come. And I think this is the point I was trying to make. The thoughts may come. Oh, this needed to be posted at 5 a.m. But you're so quick now to catch, oh, no.
Yeah,
I
the
wasted any
metaphor,
time with
"That's
it.
not my train.
Yeah, that's not my train.
That's not
Yeah,
my train."
that's not my train. There it is. No judgment about the mind just doing what it
Yeah,
does. It's
the
just trying to
trains
help.
come and go. I'm in a train station, for goodness sake.
That's right. It's just trying to help. It's trying to keep your identity together. And then we can get to the next question then. Well, if I'm not my thoughts, if I'm not going to believe everything that comes into my head, then who am I without them? And I think you were kind of pointing to this a little bit earlier on. Like, if I don't believe, let's say, for example, you have a real strong criticizer in there. If I don't believe all those criticisms, then who am I? What am I? And this is where a space opens up as we can really see. And by the way, I want to, before I get to this, I want to actually, most people wouldn't say that they are their sensations. Like if
Right?
I said, I smashed my thumb with a hammer, it's throbbing. Am I the throbbing now? Most people can make that distinction,
Mhm.
right? Thoughts are the exact same way. They are simply an appearance in our consciousness. They're simply something that are arising.
What people will say, for example, like, when you say throbbing, I think of
Yeah.
headache,
Oh
so
yeah, that's a good
so
one.
so imagine a
It's a good
headache
one.
that's throbbing. So they
Yeah.
don't say, "I am throbbing," I have a throbbing headache.
Yeah.
However, there is still
There
a
can be.
possession.
Yes.
Do you see it's like, this is something I have.
Yes, I have a headache. Yeah, it's
I
in my
have
brain.
this is my throbbing sensation,
Yes.
rather than an awareness that there is a throbbing
Yes.
sensation. But
Yes.
but the ownership is when you say, "I have it." It is
That's right.
my I'm in possession of.
That's right. And that's exactly it. Versus I am aware
I
of
am
this
aware.
phenomenon. Thoughts are thoughts, sensations, sound, sight, all of it are simply things that are appearing in our awareness, or said another way, that are appearing in our consciousness.
Yeah.
They're simply appearing.
The metaphor that really helps me, because I work with a lot of clients who are interested in exploring this at a deeper layer. I
Mhm.
talk about what's called by many the seat of awareness, sitting in the
Yes.
seat of awareness.
Yes.
And the metaphor, have we talked about this in this show before, where I talk about
I
the
think
movie
so.
theater?
No, but I'm aware of the metaphor, but let's talk
Okay.
about it now.
So the way that I've described it to clients is like, I want you to imagine that you're an actor on a movie stage and you have to be really identified with the character, and you're in a dramatic scene that is very intense, super suspenseful, all of this stuff, and you have to really embody it. And can you imagine now they say action and you're on the stage and you're really in it and feeling it, and I mean it is you, this is real, this is the experience. You're not just playing a part in front of cameras, you literally are in it. Can you feel it? And they're like, yeah. I said, do you feel the anger? Do you feel the rage? Yeah, it's fully embodied. I
Yeah.
said, great, cut. Okay. And then
Yep.
all of a sudden it's like, okay, oh, wait a second. I was just playing this. So then I said, now just imagine you've done tons of scenes. It's been months of shooting and all this other stuff. Now the directors have all gone in and done the editing and stuff like that. Now it's time to review the show, the movie. You walk into a movie theater, you sit in the center of this movie theater all by yourself. Now up on the screen is you watching you in that scene.
Yeah.
Can
That's so
you
great.
can you see yourself being aware of the fact that you were actually playing that role? And do you feel as intent? Now the thing is you may feel a level of intensity of the
Mhm.
emotion because you kind of have some memory of it and being in it and really vivifying it and stuff like that. But there's a distance between you and the screen.
Yes.
That's not me. That's not really happening.
Yeah.
And I said, so this is kind of what is the seat of awareness, but there's an actual layer beyond that. Now, I said, now, can you see yourself in the middle of a movie theater looking at you on the screen? Yes. Great. I want you to imagine you staying there, but another version of you walks out of the movie theater, goes out the back door, goes down the hallway, walks up the steps, and goes into the projection booth.
There we go.
Do you see the projector? Yes. Do you see it throwing light on the screen? Yes. Go up to the window that the light is going through. Look down. Do you see yourself being aware of yourself on the screen? And it's like, this is the seat of awareness in my mind.
Yeah. And what you're doing is turning and before I'll say this, you're turning attention back on itself,
Yes.
right? What is aware is actually getting turned around back on itself. So one of the things I want to add to what you're saying about the movie screen and the projection, that's a metaphor I'm familiar with, is, if we can when we can recognize something. So in other words, I am aware of this throbbing in my head. I am aware of this thought. This should have been posted at 5 a.m. I am aware of this pen that's sitting here. I cannot, because I am aware of it, that means I cannot possibly be it.
Right.
This is really important. I think if people can play with this just for a minute, that which you are aware of, you cannot be that thing. If I am aware of the thought, then there's no way that I can be that thought.
Yeah.
So that's the subject object. And that's really what you were describing. If I'm aware of the light on the movie theater, if I'm aware of the image that's being projected, I'm aware I'm sitting here in this theater, then I cannot possibly be the thing that I'm seeing on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Big-
I have sat in meditation and am aware that there is a physical body that I'm aware of sitting in meditation.
Seeming to be. And if you really just pay attention to the body, you'll notice that it's actually just a bunch of sensations.
It's just a bunch of sensations.
Right. Now I'm saying just, I don't mean to be dismissive around that and making it, it is though the phenomena is simply a series of
It's
sensations.
a series of electromagnetic energy
Yes. Yes.
vibrating at different frequencies.
Yes. And I'm not saying the body doesn't exist. So again, that's why I don't want to get
Oh,
into
of course.
making
Yeah. Well,
metaphysical statements, but
yeah.
bad idea for this show and for what we're talking about. And
That's another podcast.
we'll bring that next time we do another podcast. If I hit myself with a hammer, I'm going to feel it.
Yes.
Yeah. And it is, so when we're paying attention to all these phenomenon, right? All these things simply arising, and you got right to it then to come back to this. We are simply that which is aware. And we can sit in that seat of awareness. And we can notice the thoughts. Another metaphor is thoughts are simply like clouds passing in the sky. Sensations are like clouds passing in the sky. We can simply see that that's what's happening and that we're actually the sky. Or we're not what's on the screen. We are the screen. And I think that's the seat of awareness. Now, who cares?
Well, I do, because when I am aware, I
Yes.
experience less suffering,
Yes.
a lot less resistance to what is.
Yeah. And what do you notice that does to the people in the world around you?
Well, it depends on who those people are and where they're vibrating. Sometimes, quite frankly, I know where you were going with that, and
Yeah.
yes, and it obviously has an incredibly profound impact in a positive way.
Mhm.
Some, however, are in such a space where they're like, "Listen, you're too much for me."
Well, it can be threatening
Yeah,
to
that's
those.
exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really respect and have compassion for that too, in your world and for the world of people who really can't. What I would say is that, you know, these concepts, they seen as concepts first, right? Can be tricky when you've, and this was true for me in my 30s. I mean, I was very identified with my mind. I also, thank goodness, had enough suffering that I got very interested in what that was all about, and horrible anxiety that I was managing, anger, and got very interested in, well, this seems like a lot of suffering. I don't think that that was the whole point of my existence. It was to suffer through life, and so I got very interested in what does it look like to not do that? I wonder, is that possible? And started on my journey and, found my way to meditation and a lot of these other practices. So what I would say is that for those who feel like, what in the hell are they talking about? Give it a try. I think that's the point, is sort of like, don't poo-poo things if you haven't tried it, and
Well, there are some who when we talk about, so I grew up from a very fundamentalist Christian
yes,
background.
yes.
And it took me a very long time before I would read any personal development book, because that
Mhm,
was in what was called the self-help industry. And
mhm.
I was taught from my early teens that that was an evil pursuit and it's of the devil. And I mean, it's like, listen, that's all self-help. And ultimately, if you go too far down this road, eventually you'll go down a slippery slope. Before you know it, you'll be doing transcendental meditation,
Oh my god.
and you'll be taught to actually sit without thought.
And that would be bad.
And by the way, as if that is the evil that should be avoided. And so I say that just in case there's anybody listening
Yeah,
that
yeah,
if that's if it's like, wait a second, man, they're talking about meditation and I'm all okay with focusing on the breath. I've actually played around with that, but
mhm,
this whole idea of sitting and detaching from thoughts, and the idea that I actually might exist beyond a thought,
yeah,
that seems a little metaphysical, scary, and quite frankly, I've got some feelings about what that means from a moral perspective.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I would
agreed.
say respect where you are in relation to what you're willing to go into. If it, just know that there are thoughts that are what we hold on to and identify these thoughts. And of course, we've been calling them thoughts, but sometimes we actually have thoughts that we repeatedly think over and over again,
Most of the
and
time,
and we
actually.
hold on to them and say this is mine, and we call them beliefs.
Yes, yes.
All
But
right.
just a more strongly held opinion.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
so and our beliefs do have consequences. Is one of the talks that I gave at Free the Dream, is every belief has a consequence. And for a
yes.
very long time, and I'm not judging anyone who still says, I just want to stay away from meditation, that would potentially take me away from my faith or whatever.
Mhm.
I can say that you can experience meditation and the things that you and I, Daphne, are talking about. Now that I see this, there are times when I've tapped into this very similar experience, still under the belief system of Orthodox fundamental Christianity,
Mhm,
through contemplation and prayer, and
mhm.
experiencing the same level of detachment from all of the thinking.
Yeah. Well, prayer is a form of meditation.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, don't forget the rosary was just taken from the Buddhists,
The
by the
mala bead,
way.
is that the mala beads?
Yeah. Yeah. The idea was, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think all of those deeper, and let me come back to the whole core, right? What's the point? Well, it's the release of suffering, right? The release of suffering that any individual may be experiencing. And if what I would say to anyone is, if what is working for you now is truly working, then by all means, please continue. If it isn't, then, kind of start looking at, well, what are these thoughts? What are the stories that you're living in? What are the beliefs that you're telling yourself, about how it is and how it needs to be? How is it that you're fighting reality in many ways? And or, to your point, creating a reality that may not be getting you where you're going because of beliefs that you have. And if that's the case, then, you're creating probably a lot of suffering for yourself. And there's really no way that you can create suffering just for yourself without creating suffering for others. And that's
Yeah.
been one of my big take home points all along. That when I talk about these practices too, I think oftentimes people can start to believe that there's a certain level of selfishness that, well, I can't, I have to sacrifice because, if I don't, I'm just being selfish if I'm
Yeah.
not. And it's unfortunate because I think this part of the plot that gets missed is that the more that I know I love myself and take care of myself, the more I know I can be present with others.
Yeah.
That's the game I like to play, right?
Yeah.
And being present with others and then being able to support others. My cup is full, right? I don't need then much from others in that regard. I enjoy people and I can be present with them. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what I like to experience in the world. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the removal of your own suffering is going to support the removal of suffering everywhere.
Yeah. So if the topic of the voice and the narrator in your head is of further interest to you, I personally just want to recommend the book Untethered Soul
Yes.
by Michael Singer. It is an incredible read.
It's phenomenal.
It is absolutely incredibly powerful.
Yes.
And obviously, if you haven't read the Four Agreements by now, but certainly read that. And then because this may be potentially our final episode, at least not if not for a very long time, what I would say is there's one other book, and which one is it? It's A New Earth
Oh,
by
that's
Eckhart Tolle.
number
The,
1 on my list, always.
these three books, The Four Agreements, Untethered Soul, and A New Earth by
Yes.
Eckhart Tolle. Those three books would be incredibly powerful, life transformational books if what we've spoken today is resonating with you and you would like to have that voice in your head either move out completely and
Yeah.
or maybe you still like the presence of a roommate and have a companion in life, but maybe somebody that's a little bit more loving and gentle and kind and unconditionally loving.
Yes. And I would add Byron Katie's book, Who Would You Be Without Your Story?
Yes, or and loving what is.
And Loving What Is. Yes. Both any book by her, honestly.
Yeah.
And she has a podcast and, anything by her I think is wonderful. So, yes,
Daphne, this has been an incredible journey.
I agree.
I'm glad that we chose our own adventure in this podcast. And I'm glad that we've introduced the concept that life can be a game where we get to choose what's on the playing field
Yeah,
and just to have fun together. It's been
me too.
so much enjoyment over
It
here.
it has been amazing for me too, and that we get to choose what train we're gonna ride. I just love that metaphor.
Yes.
Make sure you get on the right one, but Cliff, it's always wonderful when I'm with you. I you know that. I can't say enough. You're just a dear person in my life, and this has been a wonderful, wonderful time together, and I know we'll create more in the future. I
Well,
can't imagine it's not.
let's do I imagine there are some people who are like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do without Cliff and Daphne? So let's do some final call to actions.
Yeah.
Daphne, where do you want people to follow you now that this is coming to an end?
Yeah, so I would like to shift people over to my website, Daphne at daphne-scott.com. So you can find me there. I'll put this in the show notes and subscribe to my newsletter. So one of the big opportunities that's sitting in front of me that I'm working on is bringing to life my Leadership Life Academy. So that will launch. I'm slated currently to launch that in March. So if you get on my newsletter, you will hear about all of that. Of course, you can still find my writing over on Substack as well. I'll be publishing over there, but really gearing up for this Leadership Life Academy. If you're a person in an organization who is working with and for other people, you have a team, maybe you're in charge of a budget, and you want support in balancing all of the things in life that you need to balance at the same time that you're working in this organization, I can support you in doing that. I am aware of the perils that can look like burnout, overwhelm, being overcommitted, and the things that can come with having a working life. Different than when you're a solopreneur. Not that people don't experience that in that realm either. Nevertheless, I have 35 plus years of working inside an organization and leading teams and knowing what it means to do that at the same time that you're trying to take care of the kids and have a life. And I can support you in that. So if you get on my newsletter and go to my website, you can subscribe there and you're going to hear more about the development. I have a lot of really cool things that I'm going to be doing. So you can find me there and I will support you. I am available for individual coaching as well. And if you're interested in that, just put in this, you can email me at daphne-scott.com and put in the subject line coaching, and I will be happy to reach out to you.
Awesome. Daphne-scott.com.
Yes.
Excellent. And for me, there are a couple of things that I will share. First of all, my name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and you just go to cliffravenscraft.com. And of course, if you enjoy podcasts, click on the podcasts tab and you'll see I have several. And the main show that I would love to point you to is the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. That's my main podcast, although I have several other shows that are consistently being produced. The other thing that I want to say is that I have 2 different courses that I love to give away for free, even though many people have paid hundreds and in some cases thousands of dollars for these same materials. I love to give them away to people for free, depending on where you are in your journey. And so let me tell you those 2 courses. One is my Free the Dream online course. Free the Dream is a conference that I did it was an annual event that I did until COVID shut it down. But it is all about mindset development, helping you identify limiting beliefs that are holding you back, discovering what the source of those were, how to disassociate and how to empower new beliefs, and also techniques and strategies for how to experience a different way of being in the world and how to achieve any goal. And if you don't even know what your goals are, there's a strategy and a tool inside of this course to help you do that. Daphne spoke at my very first Free the Dream conference.
I did.
An amazing experience, and I've turned it into an online course, and it is available for free. Or by the way, you could go to freethedreamonlinecourse.com, I think it is, and you could buy it. But I don't want you to buy it.
Yeah.
I want you to email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com. The second course is called Building an Online Business. Most people fail in business because they start with step number 8 out of an 11-step formula for how to create a business. By the way, step number 8 is start creating content and try to build an audience. There are 7 foundational steps that you need before you create any content. And by the way, creating content is not just a podcast. It's your website, your logo, your tagline, any of that. 7 steps before that.
Yes.
All right. And so you must get these 7 foundational steps. This was a $2,000 workshop that I taught in person. And the last time I did it in person, I recorded video of it. And now it's an online course called Building an Online Business. That course or Free the Dream course could be yours for free, but here's what you have to do to get it for free. Email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com. Put down the Choose Your Own Adventure podcast in the title so I know that you heard about it here, and just introduce yourself to me. Tell me about who you are, what you've got going on in the world. Make it about 1 to 3 or 4 paragraphs. And say, Cliff, which of the 2 courses do you think would be a better fit given what I have going on? And I will either give you one and or both courses depending on what you're doing. But all you have to do is email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com. And I look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Okay.
Daphne, I know this is not an end for you and I to be connected, but here in this podcast, this has been a pleasure and a joy, and I'm open to whatever the future may hold.
Me too.
And until next time, we encourage you to
choose your own adventure.